Will this dark figure help him or attempt to harm him? What should you do if something like this starts following you? Let's find out. Something was swimming alongside him, something large and menacing. Jack tried to get a better look, but the rain and waves made it difficult to see clearly. Whatever it was, it stayed just out of sight, as if it were watching him. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting for the right moment to strike. Despite his fear, Jack kept the boat moving forward, following the compass. The shape in the water continued to follow him, and Jack had to fight the urge to panic. He knew that losing his nerve now would only make things worse. He focused on the task at hand, navigating through the storm and keeping the boat on course. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the storm began to subside. The clouds parted and the sun broke through, casting a warm, golden light over the sea. The waves calmed, and the wind died down, leaving the boat rocking gently on the water. Jack was exhausted, but relieved that the worst was over. He looked towards the horizon and saw Serpent Island looming ahead. It was closer now, its jagged cliffs rising from the sea like the fangs of a great beast. The island was covered in dense jungle, and the air around it seemed thick with mystery. Jack's excitement returned, though it was now mixed with a sense of foreboding. He had made it through the storm, but he knew the real challenge was just beginning. As Jack approached the island, he noticed that the dark shape in the water had disappeared. Whatever it was, it seemed to have lost interest in him. Jack hoped that meant he was safe, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the island itself was alive, watching him, waiting for him to step onto its shores. He carefully navigated the boat towards a small, sheltered cove on the island's eastern side. The water here was calm, and the beach was lined with smooth, white sand. Jack dropped anchor and lowered the boat's small dinghy into the water. He gathered his supplies, including the compass, and paddled towards the shore. As he stepped onto the beach, Jack felt a strange energy in the air. The island was quiet, except for the sound of the waves lapping against the shore and the occasional call of a distant bird. The jungle beyond the beach was dense and dark, the trees twisted and gnarled. Jack could see paths leading into the jungle, but they were overgrown and barely visible. Jack took a moment to catch his breath and gather his thoughts. He had made it to Serpent Island, but now he had to find the treasure. The map was gone, but he still had the compass. He trusted that it would guide him to where he needed to go. The compass had already led him safely through the storm, and now, as he stood on the mysterious island, it was his only hope of finding the hidden treasure. Jack studied the compass intently. The needle wasn't pointing north as it should. Instead, it wavered slightly and then settled in a direction leading into the heart of the jungle. He took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of anticipation and dread. This was it, the start of the true adventure. He slung his backpack over his shoulder, tightened his grip on the compass, and started walking. The sand underfoot quickly gave way to dense undergrowth, and the air grew thicker and more humid as he entered the jungle. Vines hung low from the trees, and the foliage was so thick that it blocked out much of the sunlight, casting the path in a dim, greenish glow. The jungle was alive with sounds, rustling leaves, chirping insects, and distant animal calls that Jack couldn't identify. Every now and then, he would hear something move in the underbrush, and he would freeze, his heart pounding, but nothing ever emerged. Despite the eerie atmosphere, Jack pressed on, following the compass as it led him deeper into the jungle. The terrain grew more difficult the farther he went. The ground was uneven, with roots and rocks jutting out to trip him up. Jack had to climb over fallen logs, push through thick bushes, and occasionally use his knife to cut through the dense vegetation. Sweat dripped down his face, and his clothes were soon soaked through. But he didn't let that slow him down. He was determined to find the treasure, no matter what it took. After what felt like hours of trudging through the jungle, Jack noticed something odd ahead. The trees were beginning to thin out, and there was a clearing up ahead. As he approached, he saw that the clearing was dominated by a massive ancient statue. It was carved out of stone, and though it was weathered and covered in moss, its shape was unmistakable. A coiled serpent with fierce, glaring eyes. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he realized this must be a significant marker. The serpent statue was just like the one depicted on the map, the one guarding the treasure. He felt a thrill of excitement and fear. He was on the right track, but the stories about the island's guardian serpent flashed through his mind. He approached the statue cautiously. At its base there was a stone pedestal with inscriptions carved into it, though the letters were worn and difficult to read. Jack knelt down, trying to decipher the ancient script. As he did, he noticed that the compass was still pointing forward, beyond the statue, indicating that the treasure was further ahead. Jack stood up and continued past the statue, his nerves on edge. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, but he saw no signs of danger. The jungle was quieter here, almost unnaturally so, and even the birds seemed to have fallen silent. The only sound was the crunch of leaves under his boots as he moved forward. The path ahead became narrower, flanked by high, rocky walls covered in moss and vines. Jack followed it, the compass still guiding him, until he reached a cave entrance hidden behind a curtain of vines. The cave was dark, and the air that wafted out of it was cool and damp. Jack hesitated at the entrance, feeling a chill run down his spine. He knew this had to be it, the cave where the treasure was hidden. Gathering his courage, Jack pushed the vines aside and stepped into the cave. The light from outside barely penetrated the darkness, so he took out his flashlight and switched it on. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow tunnel that led deeper underground. Jack moved cautiously, shining the flashlight on the walls as he went. The tunnel was lined with more carvings, similar to those on the serpent statue outside. The deeper he went, the more intricate and ominous the carvings became. They depicted serpents coiled around piles of treasure, their eyes seeming to follow Jack as he passed. Finally, the tunnel opened up into a large chamber. Jack's flashlight revealed a sight that took his breath away. Piles of gold coins, glittering jewels, and ancient artifacts were scattered across the floor. In the center of the chamber, on a stone pedestal, was a large, ornate chest. This was it, the lost treasure of Serpent Island. Jack approached the chest, his hands trembling with excitement. He reached out and touched it, feeling the cold metal under his fingers. But as soon as he did, a low, rumbling sound filled the chamber. Jack froze, his heart pounding, and turned around slowly. Emerging from the shadows of the cave was a massive serpent. Its scales gleamed in the dim light, and its eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. It was easily as large as the serpent statue outside, and it moved with a slow, deliberate grace. Its gaze locked on Jack. Jack's mind raced. The stories were true. The serpent guardian was real. He had to think fast. The serpent was blocking the tunnel, so there was no way out. He looked around the chamber, searching for anything that could help him. His eyes fell on a large golden mirror among the piles of treasure. An idea struck him. The serpent's eyes were its weak point, according to the legends. If he could reflect the light from his flashlight into its eyes using the mirror, maybe he could blind it long enough to escape. Moving as quickly as he dared, Jack grabbed the mirror and positioned it in front of him. The serpent hissed, sensing his movement, and began to coil its body, preparing to strike. Jack took a deep breath, aimed his flashlight at the mirror, and angled it so the light reflected directly into the serpent's eyes. The beam of light hit the serpent's eyes, and it recoiled with a loud, angry hiss. Jack didn't wait to see what would happen next. He dropped the mirror, grabbed the chest, and sprinted towards the tunnel entrance. The serpent thrashed behind him, but the blinding light had slowed it down. Jack raced through the tunnel, the heavy chest slowing him down, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He could hear the serpent's angry hisses echoing behind him, growing fainter as he ran. Finally, he burst out of the cave and into the jungle, the bright daylight momentarily blinding him. He didn't stop running until he reached the beach. His heart was pounding, and his lungs were burning, but he didn't dare look back until he was safely in the boat. He tossed the chest into the dinghy, shoved off from the shore, and paddled frantically towards the anchored boat. When he finally reached it, he climbed aboard, his hands shaking. Jack quickly started the engine, and the boat began to move away from the island. He glanced back at the shore, half expecting to see the serpent chasing after him, but the beach was empty. The jungle stood silent and still, as if nothing had happened. As the island faded into the distance, Jack allowed himself to relax, the tension slowly leaving his body. He had done it. He had found the lost treasure of Serpent Island and escaped the guardian serpent. He couldn't believe it. He had actually survived the adventure. The journey back was much smoother than the trip to the island. The sea was calm and the sky was clear, with the sun shining brightly overhead. Jack steered the boat with a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. He couldn't wait to get home, but he also felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced dangers he never imagined and had come out victorious. As he sailed, Jack opened the chest to take a closer look at the treasure. Inside, he found gold coins from ancient civilizations, jewels of every color, and artifacts that seemed to be from long-lost cultures. But there was one item that caught his eye, a small, intricately carved stone. It was the same size and shape as the compass his grandfather had given him, but it glowed with a faint, mysterious light. Jack picked up the stone and held it in his hand. As he did, he felt a strange warmth spread through his body, and a sense of peace washed over him. He didn't know what the stone was or what it did, but he felt that it was important, perhaps even more valuable than all the gold and jewels in the chest. He carefully placed the stone back in the chest and closed the lid. The treasure was safe, and he was on his way home. But Jack knew that this adventure had changed him. He had faced his fears, relied on his wits, and discovered a treasure beyond his wildest dreams. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jack thought about his grandfather's words. The greatest treasure is not gold or jewels, but the adventure itself. Jack smiled, knowing that he had found that greatest treasure. And who knew? Maybe there would be more adventures in the future. When Jack finally arrived back at the harbor, it was late at night. The town was quiet, and only a few lights flickered in the windows of the houses. Jack tied up the boat and quietly made his way home, carrying the chest with him. His body ached with exhaustion, but his mind was alive with excitement and satisfaction. He entered the house as quietly as he could, not wanting to wake his parents. But as he slipped into the living room, he found his grandfather sitting in his favorite chair, waiting for him. "You're back," his grandfather said softly, a knowing smile on his face. Jack set the chest down gently and nodded. "I made it, Grandpa. I found the treasure of Serpent Island." His grandfather's eyes lit up with pride and relief. "I never doubted you for a moment, Jack, but I see in your eyes that the treasure wasn't the only thing you found." Jack paused, thinking about all that had happened. The storm, the serpent, the strange stone in the chest, and, most importantly, the courage and resourcefulness he discovered within himself. "You're right," Jack said slowly. "The adventure was more than I could have imagined. It was terrifying and amazing, but it made me realize how much I'm capable of." His grandfather stood up and walked over to the chest. He ran his fingers over the worn wood, his expression thoughtful. Adventure teaches us things we could never learn otherwise, and the memories of what you've been through will be with you forever. This treasure here, he patted the chest, is valuable, no doubt, but the experience you've gained is priceless. Jack opened the chest and showed his grandfather the contents. The old man's eyes widened as he took in the sight of the gold, jewels, and artifacts. But when Jack handed him the glowing stone, his grandfather's expression turned from amazement to deep reverence. "This stone," his grandfather murmured, "it's no ordinary treasure. It's a talisman, an ancient symbol of wisdom and protection. It's said to bring clarity to those who possess it, guiding them through life's toughest challenges. You've earned this, Jack." Jack held the stone in his hand, feeling its warmth and the calmness it brought. He realized that while the gold and jewels were valuable, this stone held a different kind of worth, one that couldn't be measured by wealth alone. "Thank you, Grandpa," Jack said, his voice full of gratitude, "for everything." His grandfather smiled and hugged him tightly. "You've grown so much, Jack. I'm proud of the man you're becoming." They sat together for a while, talking about the journey, the challenges Jack had faced, and the lessons he had learned. Jack's parents, who had woken up and come downstairs to see what was going on, listened in awe as Jack recounted his adventure. They had been worried when they found his note, but now they understood why he had to go. The next day, word of Jack's adventure spread through the town. People marveled at the treasure he had brought back and the bravery he had shown. But Jack remained humble, knowing that the true value of his journey wasn't in the treasure chest, but in the personal growth and the bond he had strengthened with his grandfather. As the days passed, Jack returned to his usual routine, but with a newfound confidence and a sense of purpose. He continued to explore the world around him, though now he did so with a deeper understanding of what it meant to be an adventurer. He knew that the world was full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered, and that each journey, no matter how big or small, held its own unique rewards. And the stone? Jack kept it with him always, a reminder of the adventure that had changed his life. Whenever he faced a difficult decision or found himself in a challenging situation, he would hold the stone and feel the same warmth and clarity that had guided him on Serpent Island. Jack knew that there would be more adventures in his future, but for now, he was content to savor the lessons and memories of the one he had just completed. And as he looked out at the sea from his window each evening, he couldn't help but wonder what new mysteries lay beyond the horizon, waiting for him to discover. In the end, Jack learned that the true treasure was not the gold or jewels, but the courage, wisdom, and self-discovery that came from embracing the unknown and daring to chase after his dreams. And that was a treasure that no one could ever take away from him. The story ends here. If you're interested in how a man under a lot of pressure transforms into a happy and successful person, click the video here or follow the link in the description.